Welcome to TrulyFit.
Welcome to the TrulyFit podcast, where we interview experts in fitness and health to expand our wisdom and wealth. I'm your host, Steve Washuta, co-founder of TrulyFit and author of Fitness Business 101. On today's episode, it is just me. On Thursdays, or now they're Friday episodes, actually, I record them on Thursdays. On the Friday episodes, it's just me talking about something that is trending in the fitness and health industry. And I'm also doing Monday episodes, which are interview episodes. I have somebody who's an expert on in the fitness or business related, and I'll explain that in a second, medical health industries come on to talk about their expertise. It could be somebody who is an interventional radiologist talking about a new procedure he's doing. It could be a personal trainer. It could be a nutritionist. It could be somebody with a different take on type 2 diabetes. Physicians, personal trainers, nutritionists, sort of people in that realm. In addition to that, I also have business experts on to talk to people like myself who run fitness or medical or health businesses. Whether it's a tax professional or certified financial planner, or maybe somebody who's in real estate who sells to those particular people, what to look out for, any sort of interconnectivity that we can have business, because I wrote the book, Fitness Business 101, interconnected with fitness, I also cover. So who's this podcast for? Well, it's for general population. People want to learn more about their bodies and health and fitness and the science and the studies, and of course, some motivational things. And it's also for people who are practitioners like myself. If you're a certified personal trainer, a registered dietitian, somebody else in the health community, maybe a nurse or even physicians, there's something to be learned here from that perspective too about your business and what we can implement, whether it's implementing the latest and greatest science or the latest and greatest business techniques and tactics. Now, on these episodes, this is just me talking off the cuff, short episodes, 5 to 15 minutes, about something that's trending in the health and fitness industry. And sometimes it's actually not trending in the health and fitness industry. It's just trending in general. And I want to sort of interconnect how it plays into the health and fitness industry. If I see an overlap, and I think it's important to talk about, today I'm going to be talking about the appeal to authority. I watched an interview / debate recently, and we're not going to talk politics here, but it was a political debate. And inside of this political debate, there was a call to authority, a credentialism, if you will. But I actually thought it was an okay call to authority. Somebody was talking about a particular place in the world and had a lot to say on it. And the other gentleman said, "Have you ever been there?" And he said, "No." And he said, wait, we just talked about the subject for 90 minutes and you're talking about all of these different areas and giving very fine details and specifics, but you've never actually been there. You've never set foot on the ground in these areas." And the gentleman who was saying that was a war correspondent, right? Who spent years interviewing people in the area and knew the area well. And I don't think it was necessarily just a credentialism thing or a call to authority. I think there was a piece of him that was saying, there must be so many people out here who are doing the same things. They read something and they think they have this like objective data, but they're not marrying the subjective with it. And I think it's important to do that, right? It's important to have both of those expertises. I know there's a lot of people now in my industry, specifically in the fitness and health industry, who just tell you study after study after study. But they haven't worked with anybody, right? They haven't seen this happen in real life. Their head is in the books, right? And it is a different story. If you're just looking at the studies as opposed to working, in a client-facing side, right? The pediatrician who sees 24 patients a day for 10 years, right? And sees those patients time and time again, those same people over and over again, is going to have a really, really good idea. In fact, in my opinion, better than some of the studies about what medications are working and what is not working, right? Because those studies are restricted by a lot of variables that because you need constants. But the pediatrician is seeing there's so much other variety of things going on that to me, it actually matters more, right? Me in the fitness and health industry, I have 30,000 hours experience, most of which is with seniors, right? When people read me these longevity studies, I can't help but to laugh because it's always these juicehead dorks who have never worked with anybody over the age of 45 who wasn't on, TRT. They've never worked. They don't work with women. They don't work with 65-year-olds. They don't work with the average population. Half of them don't work with anybody, right? They're not even certified personal trainers. They just read studies, right? They're PhDs. They major in the minors and they talk about all these little nuances, but they don't get the practical side of health and fitness, right? What is going on the ground? So I don't think a call to authority is wrong. But I think a call to authority is wrong, the credentialism, when it's only on sort of the PhD side. I think the call to authority should be on the ground floor. Are you on the ground floor, right? Have you set foot in that country? Have you talked to any of the people in that country, right? Well, then, maybe you should take a step back before you're commenting on this war. Have you been in the gym for hundreds, if not thousands of hours working with this particular demographic and population? Have you seen this in real time? Or is this just stuff you're reading about? Okay. I think the call to authority is right in some cases, right? There was a famous podcaster who talked about, during COVID, again, not getting political here, his sort of take on looking back at it was, even if he would have never made different decisions, because he believes that, he gave the analogy of being in a plane. We were in a plane, we're at 30,000 feet, things are going wrong, things feel bad, but ultimately you want to believe that the pilot knows best and you want to trust the pilot, right? Now, in hindsight, that probably wasn't right, So that is sort of a different call to authority or appeal to authority that I don't necessarily agree with, because I think there's an instincts part of this that we need to trust at some point when we're looking at these things. But there's a little bit of both sidesism here that I see being played too, because you'll see the same kinds of people allowing RFK to say whatever he wants to say and say he has the data, and then they go to the other side and they're talking about the sort of credentials. Where are the credentials? I think ultimately our arguments should be proven with facts, with a combination though of objective and subjective data. And I don't like people who just think that we can prove everything through studies. I've never found a study that I couldn't poke a hole in. You could send me any study in the world and I will poke a hole in that study, because we're always limited. There's always constraints to studies, right? Whether it's time, whether variables, and they don't always play into real life in the same practical way. And I think when we start to use the appeal to authority, what I hope happens in debates, and I've been looking to have debates on my podcast. It's really tough to get people on to do that because people are nervous about it, right? They don't want to look stupid on camera, and I get that. But in this sort of appeal to authority or credentialism, I think it should just be set up front, right? People should get their credentials out of the way. They should talk about their sort of authority or expertise, and then we should just leave it put. And that was my one issue with this conversation that was going on, specifically between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, is that, right, it never got put to bed. It just kept getting brought up. And once that's brought up, it should just be brushed under the rug, and the rest of the conversation should be based on the merits of the conversation itself. And I hope that's what we have in health and fitness. And a lot of times on this podcast, people may be thinking I'm talking about things above my pay grade. Well, that's okay. You can come on and debate me, and we could talk about our credentials up front, and we could do our appeal to authority right away, and then we can just get on with the conversation. Ultimately, the argument needs to be judged on its merits. But I do believe, with that being said, that it can't just be the objective merits. Okay, that is a lot of it. But these Lane Nortons of the world, the people who are only looking at studies, right? Who's another good person to talk about here? Andrew Huberman. I watched a video of Andrew Huberman try to run, right? It's hysterical. So there's millions of people, I think he has 7 million followers, taking health advice from a guy who can't run, right? He doesn't know how to run. So there's these people who will read you studies and they can pass on great information. Great. But who are they working with? And what is their ability to do these things? That also matters, right? There's a combination of these things. Now, it doesn't matter exclusively, because I can go on the other end of it. The 18-year-old with a six-pack and 9% body fat, just because he looks good and he can get himself one, doesn't mean he knows more than somebody else. Of course, I want the wisdom from older people. I do. But wisdom cannot just come from reading studies. Wisdom has to come from working. We need to marry the objective with some of the subjective, with some of the, maybe even a better word than the subjective is sort of the experiential, right? We need the wisdom that comes from the experiential part of actually working one-on-one with people and not just reading data. This has been an episode of the TrulyFit Podcast. Thanks for listening in.